Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sheriff Adan Mendoza, Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. With me today is Dr. Heather Jarrell, Chief Medical Investigator for the New Mexico Office of the Medical Investigator. Dr. Aaron Phipps, New Mexico State Public Health Veterinarian, New Mexico Department of Health, and also Chief Brian Moya, Santa Fe City Fire Department. This investigation started on February 26th with the discovery of Mr. Hackman and Miss Arakawa and their dog at the residence. I just want to do a short recap and then touch on some new information. As we know, both individuals tested negative for carbon monoxide. City Fire conducted tests and deemed scene safe for deputies to conduct their investigation. The preliminary pacemaker interrogation results were released last week, and I'll let Dr. Jarrell touch more specifically on those results. The gas company New Mexico, they also did an analysis of the residence, and they found one minor leak in a single burner on the kitchen stove, which was 0.33% of room air, which was pretty minute and insignificant. Since that time, Xena, the deceased dog, has been taken for necropsy at the Veterinary Diagnostic Services, and we'll be awaiting those results. Let's speak a little bit in reference to the timeline for Betsy Arakawa. We know from our investigation that on February 9th, 2025, she picked up Xena from Gruta Veterinary Hospital. There was a procedure that was done with the dog, which may explain why the dog was in a crate at the residence. Let's move on to February 11th, 2025. Mrs. Arakawa had an email conversation with her massage therapist at about 11:21 a.m. Moving on into the afternoon, Ms. Arakawa was at the Sprouts Farmers Market between 3:30 and 4:15 p.m. Ms. Arakawa was seen on surveillance video at the CVS Pharmacy in Santa Fe from 4:12 to 4:20 p.m. She then stopped at a local pet food store at about 4:54 p.m. Her car was seen on surveillance, and the remote control clicker that is assigned to her and her vehicle was used to enter the subdivision to gain access to the gated community at 5:15 p.m. Numerous emails were unopened on her computer on February 11th. There was no additional outgoing communication from her or known activity after February 11th, 2025. The cell phone information and the cell phone data is pending. We're working with state police to get the information from those phones, but our investigation shows that all the last known communication and activity from Ms. Arakawa was on February 11th. I'm going to go ahead and turn over the podium to Dr. Jarrell. I would ask that everybody refrain from asking questions until everybody has provided their statements. I'll step up to the podium, and then we'll go ahead and field questions from the media. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. I'm Dr. Heather Jarrell, the Chief Medical Examiner for New Mexico at the Office of the Medical Investigator. I'd like to begin by stating that it is unprecedented for the Office of the Medical Investigator to make public statements about death investigations. However, the circumstances surrounding these two deaths require accurate dissemination of important information. I've also spoken with the Hackman family prior to this conference, who are aware of the autopsy findings and conclusions and are aware of this conference. On Thursday, February 27th, I performed an autopsy on Mr. Gene Hackman. Medical examiner Dr. Daniel Gallego at the Office of the Medical Investigator performed a full autopsy on Miss Betsy Arakawa Hackman, also on Thursday, February 27th. By report, Miss Arakawa Hackman's legal name is Betsy Hackman, which is how she will be referred to hereafter. The cause of death for Miss Betsy Hackman, aged 65 years, is hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. The manner of death is natural. Autopsy examination and full body postmortem CT demonstrated no findings of trauma internally or externally, with microscopic findings consistent with hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. Laboratory testing was positive for hantavirus at a clinical lab, with required confirmation testing positive at Scientific Laboratories Division. Testing for COVID-19, influenza, and other common respiratory viruses was negative. Testing for carbon monoxide was negative. There were no other significant natural disease findings. Pills present on scene were thyroid medication, which were being taken as prescribed and is not currently a concern for a contributory cause of death. The cause of death for Mr. Gene Hackman, aged 95 years, is hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, with Alzheimer's disease as a significant contributory factor. Autopsy examination and a full body postmortem CT examination demonstrated no acute findings of internal or external trauma and showed severe heart disease, including multiple surgical procedures involving the heart, evidence of prior heart attacks, and severe changes of the kidneys due to chronic high blood pressure. Examination of the brain showed advanced Alzheimer's disease, as well as blood vessel changes in the brain secondary to chronic high blood pressure. Laboratory testing performed at Scientific Laboratories Division was negative for COVID-19, influenza, and other common respiratory viruses. Testing for hantavirus was negative. Testing for carbon monoxide was negative. Additionally, there were no autopsy findings concerning for hantavirus infection.
What?
I have been asked when death occurred for these individuals. There is no reliable scientific method to accurately determine the exact time or date of death. Mr. Hackman's initial pacemaker data revealed cardiac activity on February 17th, with subsequent pacemaker interrogation demonstrating an abnormal rhythm of atrial fibrillation on February 18th, which was the last record of heart activity. Based on this information, it is reasonable to conclude that Mr. Hackman probably died around February 18th. Based on the circumstances, it is reasonable to conclude that Ms. Hackman passed away first, with February 11th being the last time that she was known to be alive. Lastly, clinically, hantavirus infection is characterized by flu-like symptoms consisting of fever, muscle aches, cough, sometimes vomiting and diarrhea that can progress to shortness of breath and cardiac or heart failure and lung failure. This occurs after a 1 to 8 week exposure to excrement from a primarily particular mouse species that carries hantavirus. The mortality of hantavirus, the mortality rate of the hantavirus strain in the Southwest is about 38 to 50%. The hantavirus strains in the United States are not transmissible from person to person. And so this is an appropriate time to segue to Dr. Aaron Phipps, the state public health veterinarian with the New Mexico Department of Health. But before I do so, I'd like to kindly ask for everyone to please respect the privacy that Mr. Gene Hackman, Miss Betsy Hackman, and their family and friends deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gerald. I will now provide additional information about hantaviruses in New Mexico. There are many different types of hantaviruses found worldwide. These viruses are zoonotic, meaning they are transmitted from animals to humans. Hantaviruses are carried by rodents. The hantavirus found in New Mexico, the sin nombre virus, is found throughout the state, primarily in deer mice, but in other rodents as well. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome is a rare disease caused by hantaviruses, but a small number of human infections are found every year in New Mexico. Over the past 5 years, New Mexico has confirmed between 1 and 7 hantavirus infections in humans each year. Through the end of 2024, we have identified 136 infections over the past 50 years in New Mexico residents, 5 of these in Santa Fe County. This is a serious disease. 42% of these infections here in New Mexico were fatal. Most transmission occurs around the patient's residence or workplace, and the New Mexico Department of Health typically conducts an environmental investigation at the residence of all hantavirus cases in our jurisdiction. This can help identify specific areas that may pose higher risk, providing insight into where transmission may have occurred and how to prevent future infections. On March 5th, the New Mexico Department of Health staff conducted a risk assessment of the property, including the main residence as well as other structures on the property. This was critically important to address concerns about health risks to first responders, as well as to inform any prevention measures needed to protect the family and other individuals entering the property in the future. We assessed the risk of exposure in the primary residence as low, similar to other well-maintained houses in New Mexico. We did identify signs of rodent entry in other structures on the property and provided information and resources about reducing the risk of hantavirus transmission related to those areas. Hantavirus can be transmitted to people through rodent urine, droppings, or saliva, so it is important to take special steps when cleaning up after rodents. Avoiding contact with or breathing in aerosolized rodent urine or feces, especially in a poorly ventilated area, is key. Detailed guidance can be found on the New Mexico Department of Health and the CDC websites, but I will provide a very brief summary now. It is important to use gloves and a well-fitting N95 mask when around or cleaning rodent-infested areas, and to open any windows or doors for at least 30 minutes beforehand to increase ventilation. Spray the area thoroughly with a 10% bleach solution or a commercial disinfectant. Let it sit for 5 minutes. Next, clean the area with paper towels, then throw them away in a covered garbage can that is regularly emptied. Before removing gloves, wash your gloved hands with soap and water or with a disinfectant, and then after removing gloves, wash your hands again with soap and water. It's important to never sweep up or vacuum mouse droppings, since this can spread particles up into the air. Since hantavirus is found throughout New Mexico, awareness of these risks and how to reduce them is important for all New Mexicans. The New Mexico Department of Health extends our deepest condolences to the families and friends during this difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that'll conclude the statements for today. We will go ahead and take questions. I ask that there be one question per agency.
Wow.
And please state who you're directing the question to, as there's several individuals here at this conference, sir.
Sheriff, just to clarify the timeline here, does this mean Gene Hackman was likely home with his deceased wife for a week before he passed away himself?
Yes, I would assume that is the case.
Do you believe, given his Alzheimer's status, that Mr. Hackman was able to live on his own and survive for those 7 days?
I think that's more a question.
It's pretty odd. Yeah, it's very
Dr. Jarrell?
strange.
Just to repeat so that everyone could hear, the question was, do we believe that Mr. Hackman was able to live on his own and survive? The answer to that question is that Mr. Hackman showed evidence of advanced Alzheimer's disease. I'm not aware of what his normal daily functioning capability was. He was in a very poor state of health. He had significant heart disease, and I think ultimately that is what resulted in his death. I was able to look at fluid to determine if he was dehydrated, and I did not see evidence of dehydration. I did see evidence of very poor kidney function, and I think he died as a result of his heart disease and with Alzheimer's being that contributing factor.
What about starvation?
The question was, what about starvation? So there was no food in his stomach, which means he had not eaten recently, but he had also no evidence of dehydration.
So based on your understanding of the progression of the Alzheimer's, do you believe that he was possibly not aware that his wife had died, or didn't know what to do in that situation?
It's difficult to answer. The question was he aware that Ms. Hackman had died? And I think that question's difficult to answer, but I can tell you that he was in an advanced state of Alzheimer's, and it's quite possible that he was not aware that she was deceased.
This is for the sheriff. Considering the circumstances under which Mr. Hackman was found in the mudroom with his walking cane and sunglasses by him, do you think there is a possibility that he was trying to get help for his wife?
That's hard to answer. Again, it's hard to get into the frame of mind of what was happening at the time. And I don't know if we'll ever have the answer to that question, whether he was going to go for help or he wasn't. Sir?
Sheriff, are there any other big questions that you're trying to answer? I mean, does this answer the biggest questions you had about their death in this case? Is there anything else that you're really seeking?
Yeah, so the question is there any other big questions that are left? I think a lot of questions were answered here today. I think there was, Dr. Durrell went over the cause of death, and I think a lot of those questions are answered. I think the timeline that we've been given as far as the pacemaker results and the history and evidence that we found as far as the timeline of Miss Arakawa, I think a lot of the questions have been answered. We are waiting on the cell phones, but I would very unlikely that the cell phones are going to show anything else. Another question?
Sheriff, are there any signs of, what have you learned about Mr. Hackman's communication after February 11th? Did you talk to any friends of his who had spoken with him during that week-long period, or know anything about what he was doing?
So the question is whether there was any communication from Mr. Hackman or activity, and no, at this point, no. I don't know if he used cell phones or technology or emails. There's no indication of that. So right now there is no activity from Mr. Hackman.
Sheriff, do you know if his pacemaker was connected to some sort of monitoring service? If anyone tipped off that something was wrong?
The question was his pacemaker connected to a monitoring service? The answer to that is that his physician, one of his physicians, had contacted me and told me that they could see the data from the 17th, but that to really get the most information from that would come from the interrogation of the pacemaker. And that's as much as I can answer, not being a cardiologist.
I think Doctor was slacking.
Say whether or not they were monitoring, or was his pacemaker equipped to send back data in exact time so that someone could say, hey, something's not right?
I can't answer that question, I'm sorry.
Question for you, Dr. Durrell.
Sheriff,
Sir.
Was there any footage that came from the body cam from the house?
I'm sorry, what was?
Was there any footage or anything that you can see from, like, body cam footage from the house? Any?
Are you talking about the body cams that the investigator, the responding personnel were wearing?
Video? Is there any video?
No. So there was no outside surveillance or interior surveillance that we are aware of in the residence. So there was nothing to show the activity inside or outside the residence, and not at this time, no.
Dr. Durrell, you mentioned that one of the symptoms of hantavirus is shortness of breath. We learned before that Bessie Hackman was laying on the floor when she was found. What kind of medical episodes would she have had to cause her to fall and then not be able to ask for help?
The question was regarding shortness of breath with hantavirus and what kind of medical episode would we expect from somebody found on the floor. And I think to be able to answer that question fairly, it can go back to hantavirus infection, which initiates with what's called a prodromal phase. That's initially flu-like symptoms where a person has fever and muscle aches that they don't feel well after, of course, being exposed to rodent excrement. And that phase can last roughly 3 to 6 days. And then they can transition to that pulmonary phase where they have fluid in their lungs and around their lungs. And at that point, a person can die very quickly, within 24 to 48 hours, roughly speaking, without medical treatment. It's not uncommon to find someone down on the floor as part of a terminal collapse, so to speak, and that may very well have been what happened to Ms. Hackman.
You're estimating her time of death on the 11th, or is it possible that she collapsed and was alive for a couple of days?
It's hard to say. I don't think she was on the floor alive for a couple of days. I think that she went through that time period, and I don't know when she began to feel ill. And those are just things that I don't know that I'm ever going to have the answers to. But I think, and going back to that initial time period, roughly 3 to 6 days of feeling ill and then succumbing pretty quickly after fluid begins to build up in the lungs.
Given the dog was created, is it fair to assume that the dog died from dehydration or starvation?
I don't think we know the answer to that. However, given the timelines presented, it is a possibility.
Is it possible the dog had the hantavirus?
Dogs do not get sick from hantavirus.
Sir.
You mentioned that you haven't went to the pharmacy. You know, she consulted with a pharmacist for medications.
The question was if we knew on Betsy's visit to the pharmacy if there was some medication or if she consulted with a pharmacist. We don't have that information, and I'm not sure that we can get that information due to HIPAA laws, but we don't have that information right now.
Sure.
Sir. At this point, there's no indication that there was a caretaker at the home.
Sheriff, with the footage that you saw of Betsy on February 11th, was there any indication that she was feeling shortness of breath or having trouble moving around while she was running these errands?
You know, we can analyze the video a little more, but it's going to be hard to tell. She was walking around, she was shopping, she was visiting stores, but my detectives didn't indicate that there was any problem with her or struggle of her getting around. So, and I believe she had a mask on also, so I'll have to confirm that, but yeah, that there wasn't any indication of that. Sasha?
I don't know if we could better answer it, but when was the last time you guys dealt with a hantavirus case or responded?
Yeah, tell me. Yeah, the question was last time the city of Santa Fe or the county dealt with a hantavirus case. I think we're gonna have to look into that. I'll get back to you. I would have to do some data before we pull that
Have you had any
information.
communication with the CDC? Is there a concern about a bigger public health issue here when it comes to hantavirus?
The CDC is aware of this case. Hantavirus is a notifiable condition nationally. All hantavirus cases are notified to them. This is not an unusual case. We get cases every year, unfortunately. So we're not seeing any indications of any abnormal or unusual patterns.
Dr. Carroll?
We'll go ahead and take 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap this up. Is there anybody that hasn't asked a question yet? Sir.
Do we know, did Betsy communicate to anyone, family, friends, that she was feeling ill?
Again, we're going through some of the communications, and I think the cell phones may have some indications of that prior to the 11th. But as of this moment, I don't have any information that she was indicating that she was feeling ill during any communication. One more question?
Since there's no sense that this is criminal in nature, are you closing this investigation? Are you still going to be releasing body camera footage from the deputies that entered the house? What happens next?
So we will deal with IPRA requests as necessary. If there's body camera or any request for public information, we will be releasing that because of the law. But yeah, we consider this an open investigation until we close the loopholes of the cell phones, until we finish out the necropsy results of the canine and other loose ends that we need to tie up. But I think we're pretty close to the timeline and with the information that Dr. Jarrell provided.
One question on the heart disease: is it fair to describe this as a heart attack, or is it not? Is that not an accurate term for the heart disease that he suffered?
The question was, is it fair to conclude that Mr. Hackman died from a heart attack? And the answer to that is that it's a little bit difficult to say. I saw no microscopic evidence of a recent heart attack. However, those changes can also take some time to develop, several hours to develop, so that I can see it under the microscope. He could have had an abnormal heart rhythm. We already know that he was in atrial fibrillation on the 18th, and that could have evolved into a more terminal heart rhythm.
Is heart failure an okay way to describe it? Use that terminology.
The question was, did Mr. Hackman have heart failure? Oftentimes we see fluid around the lungs and heart failure and congestion of the liver. I did not see that in his case, but he had very poor heart, or very extensive heart disease. And so he would have been predisposed to abnormal heart rhythms, and hence he had a pacemaker as well.
Thank you, everybody. That'll conclude the press conference for today. Thank you, everybody.
Such a weird and bizarre outcome. Out of all the theories, nobody really guessed this. I don't think. So Jean had been, the Betsy died first. And what did they say? Like around the 11th, I think. She hadn't used it, like she hasn't communicated. She didn't check her emails, stuff like that. So they're saying Betsy from like the 11th deceased from the hantavirus.
Exact time so that someone can say, hey, something's not right.
I can't answer that question.
The hantavirus. And so that's a virus that people can get from rats and rodents, as I saw people saying in the chat. There's information online about this. Symptoms, let's see, in humans. Fever over 101 degrees. Chills, fatigue, muscle aches, especially around your thighs, hips, and back. Stomach pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, rash. And then the fatality rate seems to be kind of high. But people don't often get this. However, in North America, the absolute risk of hantavirus infection to general public is low. Only 20 to 50 cases have been confirmed annually. What a weird way to go. Most symptoms often occur between 9 and 33 days after the virus enters the body, but symptoms can appear as early as 1 week. And so she dies of this. And I guess she didn't go get help. I guess maybe she thought she had a cold, or maybe she thought she had a virus or a flu or something. Maybe she thought, I don't know. Maybe she thought it wasn't so serious. And she was seen out and about, I guess. And it's not transmissible from person to person. Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. The tank. I love the fish tank. I'm going to work on it later today some more. It's not transmissible from person to person. So she dies from this virus first. And in the household and in the bathroom, she falls over. And Gene, I guess because he has dementia, I don't know how he wanders around the house and she's deceased the whole time for like, what, 7 days or something? 38% to 50% death rate. That's just crazy. Dementia. So dementia is a general term for a decline in mental abilities such as memory, thinking, and reasoning. It's caused by brain disease and range severity. So for almost a whole week. Severe Alzheimer's. So I wonder if at any moment he saw her, he didn't see her, or he finally saw her after several days and then went to move to get help. And the thing is, she couldn't say like he had a heart attack, I guess. And couldn't even say it was heart failure, because she said of like the fluid buildup in the lungs that you normally see. But he had advanced like heart disease, I think is what she said. It was dementia they said he had, or Alzheimer's? Severe Alzheimer's? Alzheimer's disease is a progressive brain disorder that causes memory loss, thinking problems, and behavior changes. That's sad. That's a sad, scary way to go, too. Alzheimer's. Okay. Severe Alzheimer's. So memory loss that becomes more persistent over time, difficulty finding the right words to speak or write, getting lost and forgetting where you are. That's just, oh man, it's scary. I've heard of people say they have family members with that, you know. So scary, man. Horrible. What a weird way. So he passed away and she passed away within the same time frame from different things, different causes. But I mean, I wonder his heart situation. I don't know if it got worse because she wasn't there to take care of him, or maybe it was a multitude of things. She couldn't take care of him, and he at some points had seen her there and then forgot what happened, forgot she was there. I don't know how bad it can get. Caesar starts walking away or something that just completely forgets about her. And you would think that the 95-year-old would be the first person. Hey, mother died from Alzheimer's? I'm sorry. You would have thought the first person to pass away would have been the 95-year-old person, Jean. That's what I was thinking. Everybody thought Jean passed away first and then something happened to her after. You would think the person's 30-something years older than her would have been the first person to pass away. I think so too. The dog died from starvation, probably, yeah. Dog just had surgery. The dog was in a crate in a closet. They were speculating that maybe the dog was in a crate because the dog just had some type of surgery or something, and so maybe they kept sometimes the dogs, when they have procedures or whatever kind of condition, you're told to keep them in the crate. Maybe that's the reason why the dog was there. The dog didn't catch the virus. And apparently I think they said that the dogs can't get the hantavirus. Dogs. Hantavirus. Dogs are not known to carry hantavirus that causes hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. However, dogs may bring infected rodents into the home. I didn't know that virus. I feel like I had heard of that virus in the past, but I didn't know that you could just breathe it in. Rat feces. I always heard it's bad. You don't want to really come in contact, whatever. I didn't know you can get that from just breathing it in, being in the vicinity and it's not ventilated. Wow. More here. You're crazy for that. Said Fauci only adjusted it for humans. Maybe Fauci has a dog, so he didn't want to, have the virus go that route. Wow. That was surprising. That was kind of shocking. That was a twist I was not expecting. Very, very odd. The hantavirus too, is that the one where you kind of bleed out or something? I saw someone in the chat say that, but let me see. Hantavirus bleeding. About 4 to 10 days after early HPV symptoms start, the third phase of symptoms begins. This stage can be severe. It may involve internal bleeding. It happen. Wow. Yeah, man. Well, I guess that's it for that. I don't know that we're going to get any more updates than that. Jeez Louise. It's pretty grim. You know, at the end of the day, that the isolation could have been his ultimate demise. I mean, he lived for a very long time. So, I mean, he lived his life. Gene Hackman died of heart disease. His wife died of hantavirus 1 week earlier. I just wonder if, you know, had the situation, had there been, well, he's already had advanced his heart disease and Alzheimer's, you know, I guess at some point maybe he was going to have some type of health issues, but maybe if he had somebody around, because she had a medical problem. So she was his caretaker and they were, it seems like, very in love, but they also isolated themselves. Both of them had isolated themselves. And so we don't know. I maybe they didn't have communication with the family. You know, sometimes there's a negative part to isolation too. You know, you're isolating yourself from family and friends, and it's just these two talking to each other, and that's it. Maybe, you know, I don't know if they had friends. And so when they go missing for days and days and days, it wasn't even the family that was like, hey, I haven't talked to my mom or my dad in this amount of time. No, it was the two people that worked outside, it seemed like, that rang the bells and were like, it's been a while since we've seen these people. Not even the family. And, you know, his family believed that she kept him alive. She added to his life, and she probably did. His caretaker, made sure he had a strict diet and all that stuff. But in the end, she was the one that succumbed to this health issue, this disease, this hantavirus. And there's nobody that could take care of her. The only thing she could have got done maybe is gone to the emergency room, you know, but maybe she thought it was just a flu. Some people just try to hold out. I think it's a flu, it's this or that, for whatever reason. Wow. He was a whole 95. Time got him. No one can beat time. That's true. Yeah, nobody can beat time. It's a weird way to go. But they were somewhat together still, and they were under the same roof, even though it was a weird and tragic situation. And she could have lived her life probably way longer, but things happen. I guess these weird-ass situations. It's like some Final Destination thing. Not a common death. And Jeanette from Law and Crime, she said that I'm not one bit surprised that they released, the medical examiner released the cause of death for Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy so quickly. Lots of conspiracy theories out there. They wanted to show that they had the info and shut this down, in my opinion. Millie said it's not working. Tinfoil hat people are already saying they don't believe it. I'm sure the tinfoils, they're probably, this is just, it is, the timing is crazy. It is crazy. You know, she has this thing, but her whole getting sick and falling out, that could have been the last final straw for Gene, because I said his health was already on decline, his heart, his mental health. And this could have been the final thing, her not being able to take care of him. Maybe he wasn't taking his meds. Maybe he wasn't eating. His stomach was empty. She said he wasn't dehydrated. You know, maybe that was like the final thing for him, not having that care, daily care, and probably really stressing. If he did realize, I don't know if he did realize she was deceased or not, but if at some points he did realize that, and that's that shock and like not understanding what's going on and confusion in your heart and walking away and forgetting and then coming back and seeing it, you know, I don't know how it works. Millie, hey, I see you in the chat. Man, somebody said they were murdered by a cult of satanic pedos. He wrote a book about them. I didn't know that. He wrote a book. Yeah. At age 95, most people would have been in a care facility. And the thing is, he probably could have, honestly, he could have paid for somebody. That's the only thing that kind of surprised me, too. And like you said, Dusty, I'm sure she was a great woman. She really stood by this man's side, it seemed like, and took care of him and everything. But I thought he had like 80 million in assets or something. For that, man, you could pay somebody still to come and take care of the place, take care of you, cook, clean. I mean, I'm sure she did a lot of those things, but somebody maintain the house and this and that and whatever. And if an emergency happens, there's somebody there to call 911 or whatever, you know. But he could have had a personal nurse the whole time. Doug, thank you for the 5. Groundhog Day, that's just trippy, man. Yeah, that just scares me. The whole like Alzheimer's thing. Just I don't know how it works. Like, yeah, how is that like? Are they just forgetting and reliving things, or just a constant state of confusion? That's got to be stressing in itself. You know what? Final thing. I was because I talk to my mother about this sometimes, and about microplastics, and it came up the other day. Microplastics, and I feel like sometimes in the chat we talk about like health stuff. Microplastics. Is it linked to Alzheimer's, or let's see? Oh, there's no direct evidence that microplastics cause Alzheimer's disease. Research suggests that it may be linked to cognitive decline. Microplastics can enter the brain and cause inflammation and cellular damage, which are factors that may contribute to Alzheimer's. So there was this article that came out anyway about microplastics, and it was talking about like the number one contributor to people. Like if you cut out this one thing, let me see where it's at. This is like, I thought they say from like 90,000 microplastics to like 4,000 if you just make one change. I was like, what? Let me see where it's at. I had this article. Here it is. And I sent it to my mother the other day. It's going to be hard, man. Well, they did give a suggestion. Let me see if anybody knows in the chat. Oh, he talked about it, Sean Ryan. Yeah, he's a big guy on YouTube, big YouTuber. Stop eating Tupperware. Well, yeah. Well, you know, they say you shouldn't microwave your foods in there and the plastic stuff. Try to put it in the glass thing or warm it up on the stove or the air fryer. But the one biggest thing they were talking about is, yes, crochet. Bottled water, Rick, bottled water, Jen, yep. Bottled water. And I have a whole case in the kitchen. It said that making a single change can cut your microplastics intake from 90,000 to 4,000 particles per year. It said it's everywhere in the beauty products, cleaning supplies, Even the food we eat. Research suggests these particles, smaller than a grain of rice, can be harm to reproductive, digestive, and respiratory health, potentially leading to colon and lung cancer. A new scientific paper, 3 physicians report that switching from bottled water to filtered tap water could cut the microplastics intake by 90%, from 90,000 to 4,000 particles. That's a pretty big deal. So, I don't know. I don't know if I could try to make a little change. I don't know. But then it's like, so what are you getting from the sink water? Something's gonna get you. Something's always gonna get you. What's I say? In the tap water, they got all kinds of prescription drugs in there and all kinds of shit from other people pouring their medication down the sink. Pipes or lead. Something's gonna get your ass, right? Something's in the sink water, poop the tap water, whatever. Something's gonna get you. So over here, you think you're doing great. I'm drinking all this water, and now they're saying you're consuming all these microplastics. You drink the still water. And then to get the glass container is really expensive too. The glass container bottles, that's really expensive. I don't know about anything really. Given the widespread of presence in the environment, completely eliminating exposure is unrealistic. A more practical approach is to reduce the most significant sources of microplastic intake. So they're saying is bottled water, America's favorite packaged drink last year, according to industry data. With 16.2 billion gallons consumed, a 2% increase from 2023, microplastic exposures, which occurs when particles break off from the plastic's inner surface and enter water, particularly the bottle is squeezed or exposed to heat. And why that's the problem is these bottles are sitting in the trucks, it's hot. There's been times I've bought water and it tastes off from what it normally tastes like. I know there's different brands and it tastes different from different brand to brand, but there's some of them I know the taste, and I can tell if it's literally been sitting like in the sun. There's like this almost chemical taste sometimes to some of them. If you aren't ready to ditch your plastic bottles or don't have filter for your tap, there's other ways to reduce it. Beyond bottled water, significant dietary sources of microplastics are alcohol and seafood. Stopping the practice of heating food in plastic could be one of the most effective ways to reduce microplastic consumption. So, stop heating all your food up in plastic. Microwaving food in a plastic container can release up to 4.22 million microplastics per square. I'm done. I'm screwed. Wow. Just in a few minutes. Other recommendations include not storing food in plastic. Opt for glass or stainless steel containers. The glass ones are kind of expensive too. I bought a glass set a couple months ago. And they're all gone. I don't know what happened to all the glass containers that I had. They've disappeared into the abyss of the kitchen. Highly processed foods like chicken nugget, oh no, contain 30 chicken nuggets, 30 times more microplastics per gram than chicken breasts, highlighting the impact of industrial processing, which often uses plastics at some point. The world's companies are believed to generate nearly 460 million metric tons of plastic annually. Anyway, so... damn, it's detected in human placentas, kidneys, lungs, liver. The people that are eating the placentas for the, what do they call that? For the age stuff? The Hollywood people, the elite, eating the placentas. They got to be concerned with their microplastic intake. Kidneys, lungs, livers, even testicles, and blood and other organs and tissues. Startling research published last month found that the human brain contains approximately a spoon's worth of tiny shreds of plastic. Wow. These particles can damage intestinal cells, trigger inflammation, and disturb the balance of bacteria gut. Anyway, something to think about. I have the same question. Microplastic exposure occurs when particles break off from the plastic bottle's inner surface and enter the water, particularly when the bottle is squeezed or exposed to heat. Damn, you can't even squeeze this shit? So that's it. It could be both. Don't squeeze the water bottle. I have exchanged my plastic storage bowls and plates with a glass instead. What if I heat it on a paper plate? Am I getting paper particles now? Oh, no. Puff says parchment papers are lined with toxic nonstick coating. But then the other thing too is I heard aluminum's bad for you. Aluminum foil? I use it all the time. I said aluminum foil is bad. What are you supposed to use? It's generally considered safe for most uses. There are concerns about potential health risks when cooking, particularly when wrapping highly acidic foods or cooking at high temperatures. Small amounts of aluminum can leach into your food. However, the FDA and World Health Organization says the levels of aluminum transferred are usually considered low to pose a significant threat to your health. Risk of cooking. So we're screwed. We're screwed. I don't know what we're going to do, man. Stainless steel. A glass bong. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna head out now, guys. We'll see what today brings. Tonight, it's Friday, the weekend. We'll see what else. I think I have 2 notifications now available after this, so we'll see what happens. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Love you guys. Be safe. They say aluminum has a correlation with Alzheimer's. Yeah, I did read that. Glass or ceramic. Pyrex. Pyrex is dope. It's kind of expensive, I guess, but you can buy a set, I guess, on Amazon or Target. Go back to wood cook stove with iron skillets.